My name is Alara, and I'm 32 years old. For the last 10 years, my life has revolved around two things: flowers and funding my parents' dream. At our annual family gathering, they laughed at my dress in front of everyone, calling me a person with no taste. What they didn't know was that the man who walked in right after was Julian Vance, the world's most reclusive fashion designer. And the dress they were mocking was his custom creation, made for me. If you're watching this and you've ever felt underestimated by your own family, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you how one dress changed everything, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true stories about reclaiming your worth in the face of judgment. To truly understand the explosion that happened that night, you have to understand the slow burn that led to it. You have to understand my family. My parents, Robert and Genevieve, are people who live in a world of aesthetics. They consider themselves patrons of the arts, connoisseurs of culture, and tragically, misunderstood geniuses. Their lives are a carefully curated performance of sophistication. 10 years ago, they took every penny they had, including a second mortgage on their home, and poured it into a small, struggling vineyard on the rolling hills outside of town. Their dream was to produce a bottle of Pinot Noir so exquisite it would make the angels weep. It was a beautiful, poetic, and utterly impractical dream. The fundamental problem, which they refused to acknowledge, was that while they knew how to drink wine, they had absolutely no idea how to make or sell it. I, on the other hand, have always been the practical one. My world isn't one of abstract art, but of tangible beauty. I love flowers. I love the way a single peony can hold a universe of texture in its petals, the way the scent of freesia can transport you to a different memory. This love led me to open a small flower shop, petal and stem, a humble venture I started with a small business loan and a lot of sweat. I didn't create masterpieces to be hung in a gallery. I created moments of joy. I arranged the bouquets that said, "I love you," on a nervous first date, the centerpieces that witnessed wedding vows, and the wreaths that offered silent comfort when words failed. My work was a service. It was commerce. In my parents' vocabulary, that made it quaint, a charming little hobby that lacked the depth and gravitas of their grand endeavor. But for a decade, my quaint little business was the silent, unacknowledged financial bedrock of their deep and profound dream. The vineyard wasn't just a business, it was a voracious, insatiable beast that consumed money. The first year, a freak late frost wiped out more than half their delicate grape crop. I remember the panicked phone call, my mother's voice thin with despair. I drained my personal savings money I had earmarked for my own apartment's down payment to cover their losses. The third year, their ancient irrigation system gave out in the middle of a drought. The quote for a new one was astronomical. That was the year I said goodbye to the dream of a new, reliable delivery van, and instead wrote a check to a company called AgriFlow Solutions. The pattern was set. Every few months, like clockwork, the call would come. It was usually my mother, her voice a carefully crafted blend of artistic despair and maternal entitlement. "Alara, darling," she would begin, "I'm afraid we've hit a small snag. The bottling company is demanding payment up front. Can you imagine the audacity? We're just a little short until the next tasting event. Could you possibly see us through?" It was never a question. It was a foregone conclusion, and I always did it. My justification was a mantra of filial duty. This is what good daughters do. They sacrificed for me. This is my turn to give back. But my financial support was never framed as a sacrifice or even a loan. It was a bizarre kind of tribute. They called it your little investment in the family legacy. A legacy in which I held no shares, had no say, and for which I received no thanks. I was the silent partner whose only role was to provide the capital. The dismissal went far beyond money. It seeped into every aspect of their perception of me. I recall with painful clarity the day I won a major statewide floral design award. It was a huge deal in my industry and came with a prestigious contract to handle all the floral arrangements for the governor's annual charity gala. My hands were trembling with excitement as I dialed their number. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," my father said, his voice distant, clearly distracted. I could hear him shuffling papers in the background. "That's fantastic. Speaking of which, I was just on the phone with the supplier from France about some new oak barrels. They're supposed to be the absolute best for aging Pinot. With this new contract of yours, what do you think the chances are of you covering the initial shipment?" The joy evaporated from my chest, leaving a cold, hollow ache. My achievement wasn't a cause for celebration. It was immediately assessed for its cash value. It was another resource to be diverted to the vineyard. This attitude permeated everything. They would visit my small but cozy apartment and murmur about its lack of architectural integrity. They dismissed my carefully chosen furniture as uninspired. My personal style was a constant source of their gentle, cutting remarks. I favored simple, elegant dresses. Often in floral prints, it felt authentic to me and my work. "Alara," my mother would sigh, adjusting a throw pillow on my sofa as if it had personally offended her. "You have such a lovely figure. Why do you insist on dressing like your own inventory?" After a decade of these subtle and not-so-subtle digs, a part of me started to believe them. My confidence became a flickering candle in the wind of their criticism. I began to see myself through their eyes, practical, functional, and utterly devoid of the sophisticated taste they prized so highly. My value, I subconsciously concluded, was not in who I was, but in what I could provide. The annual family gathering at the vineyard was the grand theater for this painful dynamic. It was their one night to play the role of successful vintners, to swirl their mediocre wine in glasses and speak of notes of blackberry and terroir. For me, it was a night of mandated servitude. I was expected to arrive hours early to create elaborate floral masterpieces for free, a donation to the cause. I was expected to play the role of the dutiful background daughter, smiling politely as their friends asked vaguely about my little flower shop. And I was expected to stay long after the last guest had departed, helping to clear glasses and restore order. I thought I could get through one more year of it. But I had no idea that this year's gathering would be where their quiet condescension would turn into a full-blown storm. The first tremor of the earthquake that would shake my world arrived on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, about 3 months before the party. An impeccably dressed woman with an aura of quiet authority walked into my shop. She didn't browse like a typical customer, she observed. She watched me consult with a bride. She noted the way I handled the delicate stems of a ranunculus, her eyes taking in every detail of my workspace. After nearly 20 minutes, she approached the counter and presented me with a thick, cream-colored business card. It held only a name and a number. "Mr. Vance would like to see you," was all she said. The name on the card made the air leave my lungs. Julian Vance. Even in my small, insulated world of petals and stems, that name was legendary. He was a titan of fashion, a designer whose work had defined an era before he abruptly vanished from the public eye a decade ago, following the sudden death of his life partner. He was a ghost, a myth who lived in a secluded, sprawling estate an hour's drive away. The whispers in the art world said he still created, but only for a select, intensely private clientele. It was like getting a summons from a king. It turned out, he had been one of my most loyal customers, entirely without my knowledge. His discreet assistant had been placing substantial weekly orders under a pseudonym for nearly a year. He told me this himself during our first meeting, a surreal experience in the sun-drenched library of his magnificent home. He said the way I composed my arrangements, the unexpected pairings of colors, the balance of textures had stirred something creative in him that he thought was long dormant. He didn't compliment my work. He analyzed it with the precision of a master craftsman. He told me I possessed an innate eye, a fundamental understanding of beauty that no school could ever teach. Hearing those words from him, a man whose genius was undisputed, felt like being seen for the first time in my life. It was a validation so profound it almost brought me to tears. An unlikely and precious friendship began to form. Once a week, I would drive to his estate, armed with the most beautiful and unusual blooms I could find. We would spend hours in his studio, surrounded by sketches and bolts of fabric, talking about everything from 17th century Dutch floral paintings to the architecture of a perfect seam. He saw the artist in me that my parents, the self-proclaimed artists, had always refused to acknowledge. He became my champion, my mentor. He challenged me to be bolder, to trust my instincts, to break my own rules. Under his influence, my work evolved. It became more confident, more artistic, and the world began to notice. I started landing major commission decorating boutique hotels, designing for exclusive events. Then, about a month before the annual gathering, the ultimate validation arrived. A senior editor from Architectural Digest called. They were running a major feature on the burgeoning movement of sustainable floral design, and they wanted to feature my shop, my philosophy, and me. A 6-page spread. It was the kind of career-defining moment I never even dared to dream of. My hands were shaking when I called my parents to tell them. Their reaction was, in hindsight, the beginning of the end. "Oh, Architectural Digest!" My mother's voice crackled with excitement, but it wasn't excitement for me. Before I could even respond, I heard my father shout from the background, "Genevieve, this is it! This is the breakthrough for the vineyard!" He came on the line, his voice booming. "Alara, this is incredible. Make sure you tell the reporter that our organic biodynamic practices at the vineyard are the core inspiration for your work. Frame it as a symbiotic relationship. This could be the national press we've been waiting for." There was no, "Congratulations, honey." No, "We're so proud of you." My personal triumph was instantly and seamlessly absorbed into their narrative. I wasn't the subject of the article. I was merely the vehicle for their publicity. That was the moment the years of resentment crystallized into a single, hard point of clarity. Things had to change. I told Julian about the phone call, my voice flat with a familiar sense of defeat. He simply looked at me, his gaze piercing. "Alara," he said, his voice firm but kind. "An artist's greatest responsibility is to protect their own voice. Don't let them write your story for you." That was the seed. This year's family gathering would be different. I would not be the florist. I would not be the dutiful daughter. I would arrive as a guest, a successful artist in my own right. But to do that, I needed to feel the part. I needed a suit of armor. And I knew the only man in the world I wanted to make it. I had no idea that in commissioning a simple dress, I was actually commissioning an act of war. In the weeks leading up to the gathering, the atmosphere thickened with my parents' expectations. It was as if the impending magazine feature had granted them a renewed sense of ownership over me and my success. The escalation began subtly, a series of seemingly minor requests that were actually tests of my continued subservience. The first test came via my father, about 2 weeks out. His voice over the phone was a smooth blend of casualness and command. "Alara, darling," he began. "Your mother and I were just doing a final walkthrough for the party. The string lights are lovely, but it all feels a bit quiet. With the Architect Digest crowd potentially taking an interest, we really need to elevate the ambiance. We've decided a live jazz trio would be perfect. Could you sort that out for us?" He didn't ask if I could afford it. He didn't ask if I had the time. He simply assigned the task. In the past, I would have sighed and opened my checkbook. This time, I took a breath. "Dad, I'm sorry, but I can't," I said, my voice steady. "All of my business profits right now are being reinvested. I'm launching a new website and buying new floral coolers. My budget is completely allocated." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy and cold. Then came the sigh, a long, theatrical exhalation of disappointment. "Alara, you must learn to see the bigger picture. This isn't just a party. It's a strategic marketing event for the family legacy. Your website can wait. This is about capitalizing on a crucial moment." He made it sound as if my refusal was a betrayal not just to them, but to a grand, multi-generational destiny. I stood my ground, repeating that it wasn't possible. He ended the call curtly. I had failed the test. A few days later, my mother initiated the second test, cloaked in the guise of affection. "Sweetheart, we simply must go shopping for your party outfit," she chirped over the phone. "You're the woman of the hour, after all. You need to look the part." Against my better judgment, a foolish flicker of hope ignited. Maybe this was different. Maybe she wanted to share in my success, to celebrate me. We met at a high-end boutique, the kind of place with champagne service and intimidatingly chic sales associates. I felt out of place, but I let my mother lead the way. I found a stunning emerald green silk slip dress. It was minimalist, elegant, and when I put it on, I felt a surge of confidence. I walked out of the dressing room, a genuine smile on my face. My mother's smile faltered, then vanished. "Oh no, dear," she said, her head tilting with practiced concern. "That's not right at all. It's far too conspicuous. The color is so loud. You'll completely upstage the setting." She said the setting, as if the vineyard itself were a delicate, easily offended guest. She took my hand and led me to a different section, a sea of muted tones and conservative cuts. She pulled out a shapeless, high-necked wool dress in a dispiriting shade of beige. It looked like a potato sack with sleeves. "Now this," she declared, holding it up against me, "is perfect. It's chic in its simplicity. It's modest. It says, 'My work speaks for itself. I don't need to shout with my clothes.'" "Mom, I hate it," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "It's drab. It's not me." Her expression hardened. The sweet facade dropped, replaced by a cool authority. "Alara, this isn't about what's you. It's about understanding the context. You are a guest at an event celebrating this vineyard. Your role is to complement, not to compete. You don't want to look like you're trying to be the main attraction, do you?" The implication was clear. The wine was the star. I was, at best, a supporting actress. I left the store empty-handed, a familiar bitterness coating my tongue. She didn't want me to shine. She wanted me to blend into the background. She wasn't dressing me for my success. She was dressing me for my designated role in her play. The final piece of clarity I needed came not from my family, but from my best friend, Chloe, over coffee a week before the party. I recounted the disastrous shopping trip, trying to make light of it, but my voice trembled. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, wasn't laughing. She put her cup down with a firm click and looked at me, her eyes narrowed. "Okay, enough," she said. "I'm going to say what you don't want to hear. This is not normal parental behavior, Alara. They are not supporting you. They are actively suppressing you. They see your success, real, tangible success that you built with your own two hands, and it terrifies them because it highlights their own failures. You're not their daughter to them anymore. You're their safety net, their ATM, and their get-out-of-jail-free card. And they are panicked that you're finally going to cut the cord. And for that, her words landed with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me because they were so painfully, undeniably true. Hearing it from an objective outsider broke the spell of guilt and obligation I had been under for a decade. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't overly sensitive. I was being used. That same evening, I drove to Julian's estate. I recounted everything: my father's financial demand, my mother's sartorial sabotage, Chloe's blunt assessment. My voice was shaking with a mix of anger and grief. He listened without interruption, his gaze never leaving my face. When my story tumbled to a close, he rose from his chair and walked over to a covered mannequin in the corner of his studio. "It is time," he said softly, "for you to stop apologizing for your own light." He pulled back the dust cover. There it was, the dress. It was a masterpiece of deep, twilight purple silk that seemed to drink the light. He had designed it after a conversation we'd had about the rare Cattleya orchid. The cut was architectural, yet fluid. A high collar that conveyed authority, a fitted waist that celebrated form, and a skirt that moved like liquid. It was a dress that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. It was everything I felt inside, but was too afraid to show. "This is your armor, Alara," Julian said, his voice quiet but firm. "And when you wear it, I will be by your side." Oh. Driving home that night, the dress resting in a pristine box on the passenger seat, I felt a profound sense of calm. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was a queen, with armor crafted by a king and an ally who saw me for who I truly was. I didn't know what would happen when I walked into that party, but for the first time in my life, I felt ready for the fight. The evening of the gathering arrived, draped in the deceptive beauty of a perfect autumn twilight. The air was crisp with the scent of harvested grapes and wood smoke. String lights cast a warm, golden glow over the stone terrace, where guests mingled, their laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. From the outside, it was a portrait of rustic elegance, a celebration of family and hard work. But I knew the truth. I was walking onto a battlefield disguised as a party. I arrived precisely at 7, the designated start time. Not early, like the help, not late, like a diva. I arrived as an equal. As I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching under my heels, I took a long, steadying breath. The cool silk of Julian's dress against my skin was a tangible reminder of my purpose. It felt less like clothing and more like a declaration. I walked up the path, and as I stepped onto the terrace, a ripple went through the crowd. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. I saw the appraisal in their eyes, the surprise, the curiosity. I was not the familiar background Alara they were used to. My parents were holding court near the large stone fireplace, laughing with a group of their wealthiest friends. I watched their faces as they saw me. My father's jovial expression froze for a fraction of a second. My mother's smile tightened at the edges, and her eyes performed a swift, critical scan from my shoes to my neck. It was a look I knew well, the look of disapproval she was trying to mask with social grace. "Alara, you're here," she said, her voice a little too bright as she leaned in for a kiss that didn't touch my cheek. "My goodness, what an interesting dress." The word interesting was her go-to euphemism for something she found distasteful. "Thank you, Mom," I replied, my voice even. I refused to be baited into justifying myself. For the next hour, I navigated the social minefield. I accepted compliments on the magazine feature with a grace I didn't feel, politely deflecting questions that tried to link my success back to the vineyard. All the while, I could feel my parents' energy, a hostile current directed at me from across the terrace. They were watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, to revert to the deferential daughter they knew. The breaking point, the moment the Cold War turned hot, came just after my father's annual toast. He stood on a small riser, raised his glass, and spoke eloquently about passion and perseverance, conveniently omitting the source of the funds that had enabled that perseverance. As the polite applause died down, my mother saw her opening. She moved to my side, positioning herself so that 2 of her closest friends, both notoriously gossipy women, were within earshot. "Darling," she began, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Your dress. It's causing quite the stir." "Oh, Dad. Oh, is it?" I asked, keeping my gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yes," she continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The consensus is that it's a bit dramatic for a simple family gathering. It almost feels like you're trying too hard to make a statement." She paused, letting the criticism hang in the air before delivering the killing blow. She looked me up and down one last time. "Frankly, Alara, it looks like something new money would buy to impress people. It lacks the quiet confidence of true taste. You've always had such practical style, dear." As if on cue, my father joined the circle. He'd overheard the last line and let out a short, barking laugh. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of agreement, of dismissal. Now, Genevieve, don't be cruel," he said, winking at their friends who were now watching this domestic drama with undisguised glee. Our daughter is a worker bee, not a queen bee. Her clothes just need to be functional. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Functional, that's what I was. A tool, a utility. Not a daughter they were proud of, but a functional object that served a purpose. The circle of friends looked away, suddenly finding their wine glasses fascinating. The public humiliation was complete. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. The familiar instinct to shrink, to apologize, to flee, rose up in me. But then, something else rose up alongside it. A cold, hard certainty. As I looked at my parents' smug, self-satisfied faces, I saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't just misguided artists. They were emotional bullies who used shame as a weapon to keep me in my place. And in that moment, the years of quiet resentment, of swallowed words and forced smiles, coalesced into a single, unshakable resolve. I was done. I heard Julian's voice in my head, as clear as if he were standing next to me. Stop playing a supporting role in your own story. I turned my head slowly and met my mother's eyes. She must have seen something new there. Something she didn't recognize, because her smile faltered. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said. My voice so quiet and steady it seemed to belong to someone else. "But I happen to love this dress." Oakley. Without waiting for a response, I turned my back on them and their stunned friends. I walked calmly to the edge of the terrace, the murmur of the crowd following me. I took out my phone, my fingers steady, and sent a single one-word text message. Now, as I slipped the phone back into my small clutch, I could feel their eyes on my back. They were whispering furiously, no doubt dissecting my unprecedented act of defiance. They thought it was over. They thought they had delivered the final, crushing blow. They had no idea that I had just signaled the start of the main event. The response to my text message was almost instantaneous. A few minutes later, a collective intake of breath rippled through the party. Every conversation, every laugh, every clink of a glass ceased. A profound silence fell over the terrace, as every single guest turned their head in unison towards the main entrance of the house. Standing there, silhouetted against the warm light from inside, was Julian Vance. He was a figure of almost mythical status in their world. To have him appear here, at this small provincial gathering, was like having a unicorn wander onto the lawn. He exuded an aura of quiet, unassailable authority. He wasn't just wearing a perfectly tailored cream linen suit. He was inhabiting it. He didn't need to speak to command the room. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the crowd of gawking faces with a look of supreme indifference until they found me. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Then he began to move. He walked towards me with a slow, deliberate grace, and the crowd of 50 people parted for him as if he were royalty. He didn't acknowledge anyone else. His focus was entirely, unequivocally on me. I watched my parents' reaction with a kind of detached fascination. My father's jaw had literally dropped open. My mother's face had gone ashen, a mask of pure, stunned disbelief. Julian Vance, the global arbiter of taste, the man whose opinion could make or break careers, was walking towards her functional daughter. He reached me and, in a gesture of effortless European elegance, took my hand and kissed the air on both sides of my cheek. "Alara, my dear," he said, his voice a low, cultured baritone that carried easily in the sudden silence. "Forgive my tardiness. The drive up from the city was simply dreadful." "Julian?" I replied, the first genuine smile of the evening spreading across my face. "I'm so glad you could make it." My parents, jolted from their stupor, scrambled towards us. "Mr. Vance," my father sputtered, thrusting his hand forward awkwardly. This is an unimaginable honor. I'm Robert Miller, and this is my wife, Genevieve. We are the proprietors of this vineyard." Of. Julian shook his hand with a brief, cool formality, his gaze returning immediately to me. I know who you are, he said, his tone neutral but chilling. Ilara has spoken of you often, and of this passion project. My mother, ever the social climber, saw an opportunity to regain control of the narrative. Yes, Ilara is such a tremendous supporter of our vision, she gushed, trying to position herself as a key player. We had no idea she was an acquaintance of yours. Oh, we are far more than acquaintances, Julian said smoothly. Then he performed the move we had rehearsed. He turned fully towards me, gently taking the delicate silk of my dress's sleeve between his thumb and forefinger, holding it up for inspection. He addressed the silent, watching crowd. Ilara is my muse, he announced, his voice clear and resonant. Her intuitive grasp of form, color, and emotional narrative provides me with an endless source of inspiration. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before turning his piercing gaze directly on my mother. In point of fact, this dress is my own creation. It is a couture, one-of-a-kind piece, designed and crafted specifically for her. I felt it perfectly embodied her unique blend of strength and grace. Don't you agree, Mrs. Miller? The moment was cinematic. I watched my mother's face cycle through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Confusion, dawning comprehension, and finally pure, nauseating horror. The dots connected in her mind with an audible click. She, Genevieve Miller, had just publicly insulted a bespoke Julian Vance original to his face. She hadn't just made a social blunder. She had committed an act of cultural sacrilege in front of her entire social circle. A flicker of pity passed through me, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her casual cruelty. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. But I knew this moment of their humiliation was fleeting. The real victory lay in taking back control of my own story. For this, I had prepared meticulously. The previous week, after my meeting with my lawyer, I had scanned and organized every relevant financial document onto my tablet. The wire transfer confirmations, the paid invoices for vineyard equipment, the cashed checks for their employees' salaries. It was a decade of my life, quantified and undeniable. Julian, my brilliant co-conspirator, provided the perfect segue. Robert, Genevieve, he said, turning back to my parents, who now looked like cornered animals. Ilara had mentioned you were looking for significant investment capital to expand your operations. I confess, I'm intrigued. I would be very interested to hear your business plan. It was the ultimate bait, the dream they had chased for a decade. Validation and funding from a titan of industry was dangling right in front of them. My father's eyes, moments ago wide with shock, now glinted with a desperate, pathetic greed. Why, yes, absolutely, he said, his voice an octave too high. Let's step inside my office, where we can discuss this in a more private setting. A splendid idea, Julian said, his smile never reaching his eyes. He offered me his arm. Ilara, you must join us, of course. After all, as their primary financial backer to this point, your due diligence and insights would be invaluable. And there it was. The second, more devastating explosion. An audible gasp rippled through the guests. Their dutiful, practical, tasteless daughter was the primary financial backer. The illusion my parents had so carefully constructed for a decade of being struggling, independent artists, was shattered in a single sentence. The stage was set. The audience was captive. It was time for the final, devastating act. The four of us walked into my father's office, a room that was more stagecraft than workspace. A large mahogany desk, which I had helped pay for as a birthday gift, was artfully cluttered with books on viticulture. The air was thick with a tense, expectant silence. Julian and I took our places on the leather sofa, a united front. My parents sat opposite us in two stiff-backed chairs, perched on the edge of their seats like nervous applicants at a job interview. So, Julian began, his voice calm and measured, cutting through the tension. "Tell me about the vision." Alara tells me she has been investing in this vision for a very long time. My father, seizing what he thought was a lifeline, launched into his well-rehearsed pitch. It was a symphony of buzzwords and romantic notions. He spoke of terroir and biodynamic principles, of capturing the soul of the soil, and creating a wine that was not just a beverage, but a liquid narrative. He spoke for a solid 10 minutes, painting a picture of himself as a struggling artist on the verge of greatness. Julian listened intently, his expression unreadable. When my father finally wound down, breathless from his own performance, Julian didn't respond to him. He turned to me. "Alara, this liquid narrative sounds very compelling. To your knowledge, what has been the precise cost of writing the first few chapters?" That was my cue. I calmly woke my tablet from sleep mode. "According to my financial records," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion, "my direct, non-recoupable capital contributions to this vineyard over the past 10 years total $284,350. The number landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. My mother flinched as if she'd been struck. My father's face went slack with shock. They had never seen the total, never been forced to confront the sheer scale of their dependency. "That figure," I continued, swiping through screens that showed scanned invoices and bank statements, "includes the full payment for the new irrigation system in year 3, 2 separate purchases of bottling equipment, emergency funds to cover payroll on 17 different occasions, and a consistent monthly supplement to cover basic operating costs like electricity and taxes. It was never a loan, because you never offered to repay it. It was never an investment, because I was never offered equity. It was simply my obligation." "Now, that's not a fair characterization," my mother finally managed to say, her voice thin and reedy. "We always considered you a part of this. Your contributions were part of the family effort." "A family effort implies mutual respect and support, Mom," I countered, finally looking up from the tablet to meet her eyes. The hurt and anger I had suppressed for a decade were now a cold, hard shield. "In 10 years, you have never once visited my shop unless you needed to ask for money. You have never celebrated a single one of my professional achievements without immediately pivoting to how it could benefit you. You have belittled my career, criticized my home as unworthy, and tonight, you stood in a crowd of your friends and you publicly humiliated me for my functional taste in clothes." I turned my gaze to Julian. "The man who designed this dress calls me his muse, and a source of endless inspiration. My own parents call me functional." The silence that followed was deafening. Julian's mere presence was a testament to the truth of my words, a silent, powerful corroboration that my parents could not refute. My father, seeing the dream of Julian's investment evaporating before his eyes, made a last, desperate attempt at gaslighting. "Listen, this is all a big misunderstanding. Alara, you've always been so sensitive. We were just having a bit of fun. A family joke." "No," I said, and the strength in my voice was a revelation even to me. "I am not being sensitive. I have been silenced. I have allowed both of you to define my worth based on your needs. I allowed your condescension to make me doubt my own talent. I let you make me feel small so that your dream could feel big. But that ends tonight." I rose to my feet, a feeling of absolute clarity washing over me. "The article in Architectural Digest is not about your vineyard. It is about me. It is about my work, my vision, my success. And this dress," I smoothed the rich purple silk, "was not me trying too hard. It was me finally trying to be myself." I looked at my parents, truly looked at them, without the filter of hope or obligation. They were just 2 people, flawed and frightened. "The Bank of Alara is closed. There will be no more money. From this day forward, Alara Floral Design is investing in its own growth, and I am investing in myself." My mother broke down completely then, her sobs raw and real. "You can't do this to us, Alara. she cried. "We'll lose everything. The vineyard is our life." "Maybe it is," I said, and the sadness in my voice was genuine, but it was overshadowed by a sense of liberation. "Or maybe, for the very first time, your life is about to become your own responsibility." "Oh," Julian stood and came to my side, a silent, solid presence. "I believe," he said to my parents, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality, "that our meeting is concluded." He offered me his arm. "Come, Alara. We have a future to build." We walked out of the office, back through the now silent party on the terrace. The guests averted their eyes, pretending to be engrossed in their wine. No one spoke. As we reached Julian's car in the cool night air, I did not look back. For the first time in a decade, I was moving forward, and I wasn't carrying anyone but myself. The drive away from the vineyard was shrouded in a profound silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It was the quiet of a storm having passed. The adrenaline that had coursed through me during the confrontation began to drain away, leaving behind not emptiness, but a clean, serene stillness. I had done it. The words I had swallowed for a decade were finally out in the open. "Are you all right?" Julian's voice was gentle, not breaking the calm, but adding to it. "I think so," I replied, watching the familiar vineyards blur into the darkness. "It feels quiet inside my own head for the first time in years, but I also feel unmoored. They're my parents, Julian. What happens now?" "Now," he said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You begin. Family isn't always the one you are born into, Alara. Sometimes it's the one you build. Tonight, you didn't lose a family. You laid the foundation for your own life." He was right. That night, I didn't return to my small apartment, which suddenly felt like a relic of my old, constrained life. Julian insisted I stay at his estate, in a beautiful suite overlooking his famous rose gardens. I woke the next morning to the sound of birdsong and the scent of blooming flowers, not the oppressive weight of my parents' expectations. A sense of profound peace settled over me. There were no panicked texts to answer, no impending financial emergencies to dread. There was just the quiet promise of a new day. I gave myself 2 days of peace before I returned to the vineyard one last time. It wasn't a visit of reconciliation. It was an act of closure. My parents were there, moving about the house like ghosts. The arrogant, artistic personas had vanished, replaced by a raw, bewildered vulnerability. They tried to speak to me, their words a clumsy ballet of half apologies and lingering resentment. "We just never realized you felt that way," my mother said, her eyes red-rimmed. "You never asked," I replied, stating it not as an accusation but as a simple, undeniable fact. I gathered the few personal belongings I'd kept there, a box of old photographs, a few books. As I walked to the door, my father stood in my way. His face was a mask of desperation. "So that's it? You're really just done? You won't help us?" "I can't help you in that way anymore, Dad," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "But I truly hope you find a way to help yourselves." Driving away that final time, I felt a deep, wrenching sadness, but underneath it, the solid ground of resolve. The weeks that followed were a blur of purposeful action. I poured all the energy I had once spent propping up their dream into building my own. I made the terrifying and exhilarating decision to move my shop. I found a magnificent, light-filled space in the city's burgeoning design district, a space with high ceilings and huge windows. It was a financial leap of faith, but for the first time, the only person I was betting on was myself. The process was a cleansing ritual. With every box I packed, I felt like I was shedding a layer of my old life. I hired 2 talented young florists and a business manager, building a team that shared my vision. The new studio, rebranded simply as Alara, opened its doors to immediate success. The Architectural Digest feature hit the newsstands that same week, and my phone began ringing off the hook. I heard nothing from my parents. An aunt called to tell me they were trying to run the vineyard by themselves, having been forced to let go of their last remaining staff. They were struggling, she said. I felt a pang of sorrow for them, for the dream that had turned into a prison. But for the first time, I didn't feel responsible. Their dream, their choices, their consequences. One night, about a month after my departure, I was working late in my beautiful new studio, the air fragrant with tuberose and eucalyptus. I was sketching out designs for a major hotel installation, music playing softly, a feeling of deep, quiet joy filling my chest. I was doing what I was born to do, on my own terms, without apology. I had finally realized that the functionality my parents had mocked was, in fact, my superpower. I could build things that were not only beautiful but also sustainable. I had built a real business, a real life. It was a new dawn, and I was no longer waiting for someone else to give me permission to enjoy the light. 10 months. It feels like a lifetime. In that short span, my world has been completely remade, sculpted not by duty or obligation, but by my own hands. Alara is no longer just a flower shop. It's a brand. My work has been featured in Vogue weddings and Elle Decor. I have a standing contract to provide florals for the 3 most luxurious hotels in the city, and a waiting list for private clients. My team has grown to 5 incredible people, and our studio is a vibrant hub of creativity, laughter, and the constant, beautiful mess of creation. I sold my small apartment and bought a stunning little penthouse with a wraparound terrace that I have filled with my own garden roses, lavender, and a collection of rare orchids. It is my sanctuary in the sky, a place where I can breathe. My friendship with Julian has become one of the cornerstones of my life. He is my mentor, my biggest cheerleader, and the closest thing I have to a true family. We have dinner at his estate every Sunday, a tradition that has healed a part of me I didn't know was still broken. He has taught me that true taste isn't about what you own, but about how you live and the integrity with which you treat others. As for my parents, their story reached its inevitable conclusion. Karma, I've learned, is rarely a dramatic thunderbolt. More often, it is the quiet, logical outcome of a long series of poor choices. Without my constant financial transfusions, the vineyard withered. They attempted to secure new loans, but a decade of mismanagement had left them with no viable business plan and a mountain of debt. No bank would touch them. 6 months after our showdown, I learned through the family grapevine that they had been forced into foreclosure. They sold the property at a heartbreaking loss, barely enough to cover what they owed. The grand house that had been the stage for their artistic performance was gone. They moved into a small, nondescript rental apartment in a town an hour away. Their beautiful, all-consuming dream was dead, not because I killed it, but because it had been a parasite, and its host had finally walked away. About 2 months ago, the phone rang. It was my mother. It was the first time we had spoken in a substantive way since I'd left. Her voice was stripped of its usual theatricality. It was just tired. "Your father found a job," she said, her voice flat. "He's managing a small wine shop in town, and I'm working part-time, giving tours at a local art gallery." There was no shame in her voice, only a statement of fact. "I'm glad to hear you're both okay, Mom," I said. And the surprising thing was, I meant it. There was a long pause. "Ilara," she said, and her voice cracked. "I am so sorry. For everything. For not seeing you. For making you feel like you were only worth what you could give us. We got so lost in the story we were telling ourselves that we couldn't see the amazing story you were writing for yourself." It was the apology I had yearned for my entire adult life. And when it finally came, I realized a profound truth. I didn't need it anymore. I had already validated myself, but I accepted it. "I forgive you, Mom," I said. "I forgive both of you. We have begun the slow, tentative process of rebuilding. It's a relationship on entirely new terms. We meet for lunch once a month, in neutral territory. They ask me about my business, and for the first time, they actually listen. They look at photos of my installations with a quiet sense of wonder. I see in their eyes a flicker of something I've never seen before. Genuine, unadulterated pride. Last week, to celebrate the one-year anniversary of my new studio, I hosted an intimate party on my terrace. Chloe was there, Julian was there, my wonderful team was there. My parents were invited, and to my surprise, they came. They seemed nervous, out of place in this new world of mine that they had no part in creating. They brought a gift. It was a small, elegant silver frame. Inside was a professionally mounted photo of me from the Architectural Digest feature, laughing amongst my flowers. On the back, in my father's familiar looping script, were a few simple words. To our Ilara, the star of the show. We are so proud. Tears sprang to my eyes. True justice, I realized in that moment, isn't about seeing those who hurt you brought low. It's about rising so high on your own terms that their judgment can no longer reach you. It's about finally receiving the love you deserved all along. Not because you earned it, but simply because you are. Looking back on this wild, painful, and ultimately beautiful journey, I've realized the most important lesson has nothing to do with flowers or fashion or financial success. It's about worth. For so long, I outsourced my sense of self-worth to my parents. I let them hold it hostage, believing that their approval was something I had to earn, something I had to purchase with the currency of my own dreams. That night at the vineyard, the night that began with a cruel joke about a dress, was never really about the dress. It was about me finally understanding that I was the one setting my own price tag. It was about finding my voice and refusing to be silenced. It was a declaration that I was not a supporting character in their story. I was the lead in my own. Standing up for yourself is terrifying. It can feel like you're setting fire to the only bridge you've ever known. But sometimes, you have to be willing to do that to find the path to where you're truly meant to be. I learned that healthy boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They are the gates you install to let the right people in, on your terms. Real family doesn't require you to dim your own light so that they can shine brighter. They stand with you, they celebrate your brilliance, and they are proud to watch you glow. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up to your family to claim your own story? What gave you the courage to finally do it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Reading your stories gives strength to us all. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss more real-life stories of strength and transformation. And please, share this video with anyone who might need to be reminded that they are worthy of being the main character in their own life. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are the designer of your own life. Don't ever let anyone else tell you what to wear.